going to take you through the finals here, and we're going to be playing a best of three matches. So that's going to mean somebody's going to have to win best of three and then best of three again. So we might be here a minute, but these are some control decks that can end things, or combo decks, I should say, that can end things pretty quickly here, Hayu.
Absolutely. Couldn't be more pleased to be here, being your co-pilot, Daquan. And best of three is so exciting. We have seen this, at top level events many times, and it's always a stunner. We can have many surprises yet to come today.
Yeah, I think as we've seen earlier, Ryan's going to want to dodge the few counter spells that do exist main deck from Toni here in this first game for sure. But if you can sneak past those, there's not a ton to worry about, except for maybe a Brazen Borrower trying to interrupt the combo.
Right, and you see Ryan there keeping a 2-land hand. Again, we've talked about these tap lands in this Quintorius deck. Once again, tap land on 2 means that Ryan cannot use the herd migration to get a 3rd land, so setting themselves back a turn, as it were. Meanwhile, Toni finds Ledger Shredder, and that was a key piece that Toni really needed to bin these Arclight Phoenixes in hand and start getting in the air.
Yeah, and this makes a big difference not having an untapped land there, because you could at least, if you're on Ryan's side, Carnosaur, just discarding it to deal the 3 damage to the Ledger Shredder and breaking that up. But unfortunately, those lands all coming into play tap takes that option away.
Right. I mean, that's the thing with this Quintorius deck. It's so cool. It's so powerful. But because it has to play Leyline Binding, it has to play all these different cards of mana, just the triumphs can be so painful. And that's happening here for Ryan. We'll see if they can draw out of it.
Yeah, already starting to just roll through these spells here on Toni's side. Got to Connive, grew the Ledger Shredder, got all of our spells off, discarded a Phoenix, and already coming in for 5 damage here on turn 3.
And that's exactly the start that Toni needed in this first match of the finals. Ryan can gain some life here, but, Toni has the board presence going. It's difficult for Ryan to put this Phoenix back in the graveyard without giving up something like a Trumpeting Carnosaur. And Toni has another Arclight Phoenix in hand, which Daquan, he could just hardcast if he wanted.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, has the option to hardcast it. Could see if maybe you get a second spell off and can get it in the graveyard with the Picklock Prankster. But there's a few different things going on here. And it's also a question of, do you want to leave mana up to just force them to pay 1 more if they try to land in Quintorius next turn?
Right, and here is Lightning Axe from Toni. I mean, we saw Ryan there use Clever Impersonators and make a copy of Ledger Shredder. We saw Christian Graciano also try to do that against Toni in round number 9 that you and I covered. It didn't work out there for Christian, and once again here for Ryan, it's not working out, giving Lightning Axe a target that it might not otherwise have had.
Yeah, we got to see. This could be 2 big attack steps here, because we are going to grow the Ledger Shredder. If you get back another Phoenix, you're going to be getting in for 9, and that's just 2 attack steps. And honestly, I don't think Ryan's going to be able to play around anything. It really depends here, I guess, on if we're going to leave the mana up or not. Okay, it looks like we are just going to slow down so you can't lose here. Leave up Jiraiya's Disruption.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. You can't go shields down against the combo deck, and most of the time bluffing it isn't going to work because they're going to have redundant pieces. They're going to make you have it, especially with this much money on the line for these players. So I love this play from Toni. Just going to hold back. Also always has the Free the Fate and end step should he need it.
Yeah, I'm trying to think what Ryan's line could be here if you think there is something to disrupt your combo. But unfortunately, he's going to also have to take 2 damage here. Looks like for this. Okay, he's just playing it tapped. I thought he was going to try to go for it on one of those cards. I was like, this could be tough.
Well, that last hand that Ryan is holding in hand back there is the Cavern of Souls. So it's very, very smart here of Ryan to hold that one back, not only because it's painless, as it were, but also your opponent doesn't know that your Carnosaur can't be countered next turn. So that's going to get Toni to maybe be a little bit more conservative, hold up mana for the counter spell like he's been doing, and that might just give Ryan the window next turn. We'll see.
Yeah, and I think the plan might be, kind of like you were saying there, play the Caverner Souls, keep it, but call Dinosaur, keep it from getting countered, and see if you can go for it with the Carnosaur next turn.
Right, and Toni really needs to find more Arclight Phoenixes. There's some world in which Toni could potentially have lethal this turn if he finds enough Phoenixes, but it's looking a little bit dodgy for that prospect. And this Cavern of Souls is going to be pretty brutal.
Yeah, it looks like even if you got another Phoenix, I think there's one in the graveyard, so you'd only be able to attack for 10 here.
Right. Yeah, you would need two more Phoenixes. And there's only one in the graveyard. So it's not quite lethal this turn. And there's not really any burn in Toni's deck either. And, once Ryan manages to combo off, if Ryan manages to combo off, then they're going to be gaining so much life that it's going to be hard for Toni, even if he survives, to kind of win with this Air Force.
Yeah, because I'm thinking here the only thing that could really break up the situation with the Carnosaur would be if he still had a Brazen Bar in hand and could at least use the adventure side to bounce it before the cloned copy would come into play. But that's not in hand. So we're going to just, oh, whoa, wait a minute. Looked like Ryan was going to use the Carnosaur there.
Well, for Ryan, it's also pretty scary because the way that the Quintorius combo works, if you use your Carnosaur to start the chain, you have to hit a Quintorius first. If you hit a copy first, you have to copy your Carnosaur. And there are situations in which you whiff, even if your Carnosaur doesn't get counted and makes it onto the battlefield. So Ryan may be thinking, should I be hedging against something like that, taking out one of these threats, maybe buy myself another turn? But ultimately, I think decides to do the brave thing and just go for it.
Yep, here we go. And could just go for Quintorius here if you now have enough mana to play around at least one of the spells that would make you pay more mana.
Oh, but this is so interesting. Quintorius is much safer for the combo.
Yep.
And yeah, Ryan saw that Toni does not have two blue ups, so that's no double spell pierce. And I think that's going to be Ryan finding the way here in game one.
I think so. Yeah, Ledger Shredder gets to go ahead and connive. Not really going to do much here. Then Impersonator is going to become a Quintorius. However, it was not the double here, so Spark Double would actually leave another Quintorius on the battlefield. So you do need to hit these, hopefully in the right order for Ryan here, but I think he's going to be okay.
Right. It's interesting. They play 6 of these clone effects. 4 of them are Spark Doubles. You want to hit Spark Double first because that means your clever impersonators can then copy a non-legendary copy of Quintorius. But sometimes you're going to hit it in the wrong order. The 4 copies of Spark Double are enough, though, to get the job done once you start hitting them.
Yep, this is going to do it either way. So like now you're going to end up with 4 Quintorius. You're going to get 3 triggers here. And then the next one will just copy, and that will be more than enough.
Right, and this is what Toni was saying, right? In game one, there's very little interaction that you can actually use against these Quintoriuses, and Toni is really going to be leaning on these post-board games.
Yeah, so Ryan goes up a game here in this first match, and that's kind of sort of how we expected it to go, right? If you can get the mana, you can play around these extra cost counter spells, if you want to call them that. Like, you're in pretty good shape in game one. Now it's just going to be a matter of how the sideboard plays out from here, especially since both sides know each other's situation really well.
Right, like with Ryan, I mean, this is the first time that they are playing against Phoenix this whole weekend, so I'm sure that they'll have tested this matchup extensively during their preparation, but it's different, when you get to the tournament and you have to play it, and it's the finals, and you're playing for $10,000, all of those things. But Ryan handling it admirably so far, and Toni having beaten Christian in round number 9 with a little bit more experience here. You see so many cards coming in, just more disruption, more counter spells, hoping to snipe the combo.
Yeah, and people might say, well, they're both in the finals. They both qualified for Worlds. this is still effectively a $10,000 ante match with the trophy on the line. So there's still a lot to play for here.
Right. I think we've been talking all weekend, about how much people players want to make the World Championships. That's what it's all about. But walking away with the title, the bragging rights, saying that you were the one who walked away with the whole thing. I mean, there's nothing compares to that.
Yeah, no joke. I'm with you. I don't own any trophies, and I would love to have one. So
yeah, I have a store championship playmat. I don't want to brag, but
yeah, I might have one or two of those somewhere, if that counts.
Wow, these opening hands. I mean, Toni with the Shredder, Prankster, Treasure Cruise, no counter spells, but a great curve out here from him. And this is so awkward for Ryan. So awkward.
Yeah, Ryan's deck really, if you, at the very least, you want to be able to, I guess you're going to hold it because you can cast a ley line early if you needed to. But realistically, he wants to be finding those lands that get the extra lands or the spells that get the extra lands into play. Because you need to have that 5 mana, 6 mana to give you the options you need.
Well, Ryan can't actually even cast that Leyline Binding right now because Katria Triumph, I believe, is the Teemo one. So that doesn't actually make white, and things are so awkward for Ryan. Oh, there's the white mana.
Wow, that was a good draw there for Ryan. Allow you to go find the planes here, and now you can unlock a spell here and actually save yourself a little bit of pain, possibly.
Right, and Ryan's deck, I mean, they have a lot of these effects, right? 2 copies of Herd Migration, the 4 Fertile Footsteps from the Beanstalk Giants, the 4 Tanukis, 3 Fertile Footsteps. And so, there are a lot of these effects and a lot of natural white sources to draw. Perfectly reasonable keep from Ryan, especially on a mulligan, but I bet they are so relieved to see that Herd Migration.
Yeah, I was interested to see which way these were going to be played, right? If Ryan was going to wait until maybe there was a trigger to try to use it, but already fearing that maybe that might send a Phoenix to the graveyard. But also, does Toni care enough about protecting the Ledger Shredder to where we were going to use that negate, or we're just going to leave it up to try to save for a bigger spell?
Right, and I think that's why you see Toni actually using the Picklock Prankster. If he hits something like a Spell Pierce, great. That's just a nice way of kind of saying no to that Leyline Binding, but not hitting it, not the end of the world. I mean, he would like to get more early pressure, of course, but this is very different from the pre-board games. We heard Toni say it himself, wants to play much more of a tempo control game in these post-board games.
Yeah, and after a little bit of a rough start, Ryan's hand is coming together a little bit here. He found one of his sideboarded cards here for removal. Still has Quintorius. Looks like a Garuda is there. So, decided to go ahead and just buy his companion. So there's a lot kind of happening here for him and not being under pressure. So they've got a good setup here right now.
Wow, and Picklock Prankster finds Mystical Dispute. So, Garuda might have the filter hybrid mana there going on, but it is a blue spell. So Mystical Dispute, a great answer to a Garuda. Toni has the negate for Quintorius. So, I mean, the tempo control game very much online.
Oh, for sure. This is the plan that Toni wants, saying, okay, I know Ryan's spells are slower, so you can take your time. You can deal with them one for one, because rarely is Ryan's deck going to be playing more than one spell at a time. So as long as you can keep getting some consistent damage, later in the game, you can get those Phoenixes and close things out.
Yeah, and I love a counterspell. I love tempo decks. So this is really right up my alley. I love to see these top level players kind of play this kind of strategy. And, we're talking about Ryan has so many cards in hand, so many threats. Well, Toni also has a full grip. And guess what? Toni's spells cost 1 and 2 mana. And Ryan's cost 5 and 6.
Yeah, that's the biggest difference here, is Ryan has to play, like I was saying, one spell a turn. It's like, figure out what you want to play for 5 mana this turn. Then figure out what you want to play for 6 mana next turn. Right? But unfortunately, Toni's hand right now is pretty stacked with answers of multiple varieties. All right, Karuga on the stack.
So Ryan named Dinosaur with the cabin, and that makes sense. Karuga and the Trumpeting Carnosaur, both dinosaurs. So this one is definitely not counterable, but Gyruda, I believe, is a demon kraken, so not a dinosaur, and can therefore be countered by the mystical disputes you see in hand there.
Yeah, I totally forgot those creature types. That is an awkward combo.
Right. First of all, who did this? you know, which simic mage was responsible for this monstrosity?
Yeah, pretty much. Like, why did this happen? But this is a real thing. I mean, it is still a 5-4 with no real answer to it right now, unless I guess Toni wants to bounce it with an Otawara, but probably not.
Right, and this is the problem with the Phoenix sideboarding, right? You have to sideboard out all of the removal because it just doesn't do anything against the combo. But then your opponent can kind of do this plan B thing, play a 5-4, and that's outmatching all the creatures that are in your deck right now.
Yeah, I'm kind of wondering, under the circumstances, if you saw the Karuga get resolved, do you go ahead and say, like, hey, maybe we spark double it since it's non-legendary?
I mean, it's not nothing, right? You would get to draw 2 cards. So I don't hate it. Ryan doesn't have that many good options right now.
Yeah, because that's sort of what I'm looking at here. It feels like the safer play of what's in hand. And once they're in your hand, you don't really have a way to discover into them anyway. So you find a way to use them for something else.
Right. And this is very sweet here from Toni, by the way. Quintorius goes on the stack, and Toni says, I'm going to use this mystical dispute while I can still get value out of it. Even though it's not a blue spell, I have to pay 3 for it. You know, the value of cards like mystical dispute, spell pierce, etc., go way, way down later on in the game.
Yeah, especially with a deck like Ryan's, it just keeps looking for more mana to just keep playing those bigger and bigger spells. So you got to use them where you can.
Right. But for Toni, I mean, these creatures are so great in the deck. The Picklock Pranksters, they can get in the air and still, because of vigilance, stay back on defense if necessary. Young Pyromancer is going to just gum up the board with a ton of little chump blockers, and just a classic combination: Young Pyromancer plus multiple counter spells in hand. This is where every Izzet player wants to be, in any game of Magic, let alone in the finals of the Arena Championships.
Yeah, we've seen this get brought in a couple of times throughout the weekend, and many times we've seen 3, 4, 5 extra tokens sitting on the battlefield. And when you don't have trample on the other side, that just blocks for days.
Absolutely. Young Pyro is just such a classic card, but so good in so many situations. When you need to get out on the board, when you need to be aggressive, it does the job. When you need to chump block, it does the job. It just really does everything.
All right, looks like we can go ahead and attack here with this Garuga, and Garuda in hand looks like it was being queued up to be cast post-combat. And it looks like that's what we're going to go for here.
Yeah, this one, you can see, doesn't have that red border on Arena. That means it is very, very liable to get countered by Mystical Dispute.
Yeah, sadly, I'm trying to think what outs Ryan would have here under the circumstances. And it almost feels like, in a weird way, Ryan might want to get Carnosaur and only be copying Carnosaurs to get out of trouble.
Right. I think Carnosaur definitely is the best draw. It can't be countered thanks to the Cavern. And, occasionally maybe you just hit your combo and you go off, or you can copy Carnosaur a bunch of times, make a bunch of Tramplers. So certainly that would be a great card for Ryan to look for. And that's kind of why you saw Ryan take the risk and try to get this Garuda on board, because Garuda's job in this deck is to find Trampling Carnosaur.
All right, Toni's feeling a little safer now with some blockers and some vigilance flyers. Going to go ahead and get the full attack in there for 5. And unfortunately, just a mountain drawn from Ryan here.
Oh. Ryan can make a lot of Karugas.
Very true. And still have a lot of mana here, not aware that there's yet another counter, in Toni's hand, but still has options.
So Ryan has Consecrate Consume. I mean, this would be great if Toni had something like a Crackling Drake. Now it's just trying to get rid of the young Pyromancer. Is there a way that Toni can connive onto the Ledger Shredder and sacrifice that instead?
Let's see. Using the prankster, maybe, I guess, depending on what we find here.
Okay. Those are some nice finds.
Those are definitely things. Like, let's see. So you got a brazen bar and a spell snare, really, that are probably under consideration here.
Yeah, sleight of hand being sorcery speed, not what you want in this scenario. Brazen Borrower is interesting. You could use that for 2 mana, bounce something like the Karuga, perhaps, or even one of your own Picklock Pranksters, and that way you get to connive onto Shredder and sacrifice Shredder. But letting Young Pyromancer go, also relatively reasonable here.
Yeah, I think you've got enough handled. You're going to be able to keep putting extra counters on this Ledger Shredder. So damage can still happen and get in there, and you only need a couple of attack steps from here with your opponent at 15.
Toni has 6 power on the battlefield already. There's some world in which he just takes 5, flashes out Brazen Borrower, and tries to hit hard.
Yeah, I think that was the consideration here on if it's worth it to try to bounce the Karuga or just play your own borrower and just go full send.
Right, normally you would think Toni wants to keep this Brazen Borrower in hand to disrupt the combo, but I think Toni is feeling in a pretty safe spot, has negate still, has a mystical dispute. So lots of action left in hand.
All right, so you get to connive here. Another shredder. Looks like we're going to discard sleight of hand.
And I think that really tells you something about Toni's priorities here. I mean, like the sleight of hand is a great card, great cantrip, but it's sorcery speed, and you're not really playing the Phoenix game this game. You're really doing this kind of go wide, small army of critters game plan. And so I really like this decision here from Toni saying, okay, I'm going to get rid of Ledger because I have an extra one, but that sleight of hand isn't really doing a lot.
Yeah, now it's kind of curious to see. I was wondering when it resolved what he wanted to copy there. But he looked like he just copied a Ledger Shredder. We are going to go ahead and bounce that with the adventure side of the Brazen Borrower. And does find a Carnosaur as part of the draw from that connive trigger.
Okay, all right, things are getting interesting now. So Toni has 6 power on the battlefield. Phoenix is live. There's also a hall of storm giants hiding out there.
Yeah, I think this is going to be the question is it too late?
Well, the second brazen borrower being found was key here. Carnosaur, sure, can't counter that, but once it comes down, if it's hitting, one of these coffee effects, you see Ryan, that little wry smile, you don't want to be drawing too many of those.
Yeah, it's already tough, right? You have 3 in hand. You've already had 1 go to the graveyard. Or actually, no, you got that one bounced. So you still have 3 more in the deck that could possibly be hit. All right, attacking for 5 here, which on the surface feels a little inconsequential, but not totally.
I just had to quickly check that Trump Carnosaur does not go to face. So you cannot discard to a lightning bolt your opponent.
Unfortunately not. That would be outstanding for the dinosaur players, but that is not the case.
Yeah, so it's pretty safe here for Toni to really just take this 5, conserve all the resources.
Yeah, Toni's given it a good thought, but I think with the counters and such in hand, Toni's all right.
So Carnosaur comes down. That can't be countered, but depending on what is hit with the Discover, the Brazen Borrower in hand, that can basically juke any Spark Top double target.
Yeah, and now you still have this negate. You also have the dispute here. Kind of dealer's choice how you want to deal with this.
Yeah, it's interesting. You see Toni there hesitating. Dispute, like we said, you want to use that earlier on, but uh, it also does answer something like a Gyruda when negate wouldn't. So I like just the double check there from Toni, making sure that it always has everything possible up. And this is going to be lethal here with Hall of the Storm Giants.
Yep, even without Hall of Storm Giants, you've got it just in creatures.
Yeah, and Arc-like Phoenix in hand as well. Toni Ramirez Pascual playing that tempo control game he was talking about and just showing that he is a master at it.
All right, looks like we're going to be evened up in this first match, and we'll be going to game 3. Yeah, that was a bit more back and forth than it looked like it was going to be the way that started out, because Toni's hand was loaded to start that, had all the defense possible.
Yeah, I mean, it was just multiple counter spells right from the beginning, and Toni was very careful with those free the face to always be selecting the mystical disputes, taking the negates, just making sure that there's no gap in which, he's left without some form of protection, and ultimately got there through a combination of those flyers and, of course, Young Pyromancer.
Yeah, this is starting to feel like a case where the pre-sideboarded games might favor Ryan a bit, but after you look at all the cards that come in for Toni post-board, it kind of favors the Izzet Phoenix deck as long as that player is willing to play a little bit of a slower, steadier game.
Oh, that's not a hand you want to see for Ryan.
Definitely not. I mean, not great on either side, but definitely worse for Ryan, I think, here. When you're talking 6 lands and a spell.
All right. I mean, with Phoenix, it's interesting. There are so many keepable hands with Phoenix because half your deck or something is cantrips and treasure cruisers. So you really, it's very easy to find hands that say, okay, they're not perfect right now, but there's a lot to do later on. This one is a lot sketchier. Ledger Shredder on 2, though, can solve a lot of those problems, or you could just draw the Consider.
Yeah, exactly. Just rip it off the top. That's the easiest way to solve your problems.
This mulligan from Ryan is looking a lot nicer. Gyruda, Quintorius, Clever Impersonator, hoping to fade some kind of counterspell, sort of removal. Some ramp would be nice too, but Toni doesn't have any of those in hand right now.
And Ryan did pick up a redundant Quintorius here, which is good in case there is some type of counter magic, but it doesn't appear that Ryan has any way to ramp here.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, the Quintorius combo, when it happens on turn 4 or turn 5 with the Carnosaur, I mean, it's already relatively beatable, right? Like we saw Toni kind of be able to disrupt it pretty successfully last time. But if they have to wait and do it the hard way, things can get really tough for the Quintorius player.
And there's a mystical dispute. So, the little bit of window that Ryan may have had looks like it's already starting to close somewhat.
Yeah, and that mystical dispute being open information as well is kind of a headache here for Ryan.
Yeah, no doubt. It might even just be a case where Ryan might try to just run out the Karuga, get a couple extra cards, maybe a land or two, and just play it that way, since there's not a lot of pressure happening right now.
Right, and running out the Karuga also makes sense as a little bit of a bait, should we say? It's like a kind of a temptation for the mystical dispute. Like, do you want to spend your counterspell now? But drawing a Tanuki might change that equation there, Daquan.
That is true. I mean, it's going to be, and Ryan has also obviously done well with this deck all weekend. It's just going to come down to how they prioritize each of these spells. And decided to go with the Clever Impersonator here. And we have seen before where you go ahead and copy one of those Ledger Shredders, and those extra cards make a difference.
They definitely do make a difference. And, we saw Graciano do it in round 9. We're seeing Ryan doing it multiple times. This is definitely something that their team must have worked on and realized was, a play against Phoenix. But So Tony's Ledger Shredder cost 2 and Ryan's Ledger Shredder cost 4 and it got bounced.
Yeah, there's a bit of we'll call it a valley there between 2 and 4 mana. All right, still hitting all his mana here. So Tony has plenty of mana to leave open the dispute if you need to. Not really much else going on here, though. I mean, kind of dispute or no, I guess, unless you want to bounce something with Otawara.
Right, and we saw Tony actually be super, super patient there. I think not many Phoenix players, even in this position, would have taken the Otawara over over the Treasure Cruise from sleight of hand. Tony only has 5 cards in the graveyard, but that can change very quickly. But Tony just says, I need every single piece of interaction I can get. I already spent my Brazen Borrower. I don't have a bounce effect. And, this is just Tony saying, I need to make extra sure. And I love this decision making from Tony.
Yeah, this is good for Ryan here. Just saying, I'm going to go ahead and make you spend it. And then next turn, we find out if you have another one. And did not draw any interaction here, just an island.
No, so that Otawara is going to be, doing a lot of work for Tony.
Yeah, and we are discarding the Phoenix here. But honestly, it might have almost been worth it just to play the Phoenix with nothing in hand. But did pick up a Picklock Prankster.
Well, unfortunately, with Ledger Shredder and Brazen Borrower being non-legendary, that Otawara costs quite a bit. So I think I love this patience here from Tony. Otawara, that's going to cost 4. That's okay. He even has the Free the Fae this turn to use in order to try and either find a counter spell for this or, to just put some cards in the graveyard, hopefully find a Treasure Cruise for next turn.
Yep, and that's exactly what's going to happen here. Did not find a counter or anything there. Did find a Consider, but you're probably going to have to spend your mana on this Otawara.
Some gambling part of me would be tempted, I think, to use Consider and try and find it, but this is a much, much better play from Tony, and you should not do that at home.
All right, connive into a Treasure Cruise.
Okay.
All right, we are going to Otawara the Quintorius Khand here.
Okay. Right, a little nod of recognition there from Ryan.
Yep, Spark Double didn't have a target, so just died.
And this is where Phoenix really wants to be, untapping with 1 million mana available and Treasure Cruise ready to fire.
Yeah, so you've got a Treasure Cruise. Looks like we're just going to make this the first spell of the turn.
Yeah, may as well see what your options are. Plenty of cards in the graveyard to exile. Those are not great options.
Yeah, I'm looking. They're not bad, but they don't really solve your problem, especially when you already know there's one Quintorius over there.
Okay, so Tony gets to see a lot more cards. That's a second Phoenix.
Actually, 3, 6, 9, 12 is all 12? We've got there. Actually, you do have a spell that could deal 2, but how much mana do we need to spend? We only need one more spell. This could be it.
Wait, you're right. Prismari Command goes to face for 2. There's plenty of mana for Tony. Consider, find another Treasure Cruise, whatever at this point. And that's just legal, I think, from Tony Ramirez Pascual.
Get to deal the 2. Checking the graveyard to make sure. But yes, there are a couple of Phoenix already over there.
Right. Could even go deal 2, draw 2, discard 2, and put this other Phoenix in the graveyard just for extra redundancy against a drawn Leyline Binding.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think this is everything right here.
Wow, what an incredible game. A set of side post board games really here played out by Tony. I mean, the game one looks so dominant for Ryan, but just when you know a deck this well, when you know every tiny thing you can do in all the little edges, it's just a treat to watch.
Yeah, almost doesn't matter what gets discarded here as long as you get the Phoenix into the yard. Go to the attack step, get 3 Phoenixes, and that's going to be 15 damage.
Wow. Just incredible play here from Toni. I love to see it. And one match up.
Yep, Toni wraps up that first one. And honestly, that's kind of how we expected it to play out. It's just going to be a tough road, I think, for Ryan in these post board games because there's just so much interaction.
Right, but there's still all to play for, right, to climb, because there's, the game one seemed so dominant for Ryan. There was almost nothing that Toni could do. And if you have the game one locked up, you only need to break serve one. So you only need to steal one of those post-board games. So I think Ryan's still very much in with a chance here.
Yeah, just got a high roll one time. But let's see if Ryan can do that when we come back. We're going to take a quick break and get into that second match of our finals.
Hey everybody, welcome back to coverage of Arena Championship 5. It is top 8 time here, and we are in the finals, which is best of 3 matches. So we have a lot of magic yet left to play. Joining me here at the virtual news desk are our broadcasters bringing you those final matches, Daquan Watson and Hi Yu. Toni Ramos Pascual up a match right now. Daquan, what are your thoughts here going into match number 2?
Man, they actually both played very well in that match. It was just a case of Toni drawing all the interaction and just really stifling everything that Ryan was trying to do in those final 2 games.
Hi, do you think Toni's going to pull it out here?
I mean, I think he has to be favored at this point with a match under the belt already. And, we saw those post-board games. They seemed very dominant, but anything can happen, and this combo can really kill you out of nowhere.
Let's take a look at the bracket, everybody, to remind you what happened so far. Today in our top 8, we are in the finals. Ryan Condon on Quintorius Combo versus Toni Ramos Pascual on Is It Phoenix. No Rakdos Vampires left in the tournament despite being nearly 50% of the field headed in. Toni Ramos Pascual has a match win under his belt, just needs one more. It's finals time yet again. I'll send it back to you two.
All right, so for those who get you caught up here, we do have Ryan Condon versus Toni Ramos Pascual. With Toni being up 1 match already, we are playing best of 3 matches. So if Toni can lock this one up, he gets the grand prize, the trophy, the $30,000. Both these players are already qualified for the World Championships by way of making the finals here. So, Hayu, what are we expecting here in this first game in this second match of the set?
Well, for Ryan, they're hoping for a repeat of game one from last time where Toni just didn't really have any way to interact with what Ryan was doing, and Ryan played very well around, the Jawari disruption, around Spell Pierce potentially, and ultimately got to combo off. So I think Ryan is hoping get this one in the books, kind of, just same order of business as previously, and hope that post-board is going to go a little bit better for them.
Yeah, and Ryan kept a hand here that looks like it's going to allow for an early ley line if necessary, and has the Beanstalk Giant to get some wrap action going. And this is kind of where Ryan wants their deck to be right here in the early going.
Right, and you see Toni using Consider in that first turn instead of Sleight of Hand. So now Sleight of Hand is going to be used as sorcery speed, and that means that, Toni can represent something like a Spell Pierce, but certainly this Jawari Disruption not available to counter, for example, a Fertile Footsteps from Ryan.
Yeah, and this is just one of those tough situations where, as much as you can see a lot of cards with this Phoenix deck, sometimes you gamble on those draws and they don't come together immediately.
Right. The good news for Toni fans out there, and I know there's a bunch of you supporting him today, that there's no combo piece just yet for Ryan in this game. Leyline Binding is available, there's Beanstalk Giant available, but no actual way of winning the game. So Ryan is really hoping to be able to top deck one of those powerful effects.
Yeah, and right now it looks like both sides are just playing a bit of a setup game. Toni says, all right, I know my hand's slower. Let's go ahead and build up a little bit. Ryan has a defensive ley line if necessary. Otherwise, slowly start building their mana so that way they can cast one of these big 5 or 6 mana spells when the time comes.
Right, and you see Toni, this is really the power of the Phoenix deck, right? There's so much card selection, and even though cards like Fiery Impulse are not that powerful in this matchup, you can still decide, which one am I going to want to put in hand or which one am I going to pitch away. And so just the ability to select exactly what you need is really one of the attractions to play this deck.
Yeah, and I think also, to some people who don't know, it might look a little aggressive to want to ley line away the Ledger Shredder, but that is one of the cards that enables a lot of filtering of this deck and gets those Phoenix into the graveyard.
Right. If you're in Ryan's seat, you don't know what Toni has. Maybe Toni's stuck with 3 copies of Arclight Phoenix and no way to connive them away. So I love taking out that Ledger Shredder. But Toni had the follow-up, the second Shredder, plenty of removal available, and Treasure Cruise for a little bit later down the line.
Yeah, and it looks like Ryan is going to try the play here of possibly copying a Ledger Shredder. Looks like what they're setting up here.
We've seen this happen quite a few times.
And there's a hesitation here before. Says, no, we're just going to copy Leyline.
Wow. And, I think Toni prioritized putting those Fiery Impulses in hand because of this exact play. He's seen Ryan do it. He saw Christine Graciano do it earlier on. He knows, okay, this is their play pattern, right? They're going to try and copy this Ledger Shredder. I'm going to have the answer for it. But Ryan says, instead of that, how about I strand all of these removal spells in your hand and take away this Shredder from you as well?
Here's an interesting thing I don't think we've run into so far with Ryan's deck, but is it worth it to just hard cast Migration?
Oh, that's music to my ears, Daquan.
Yeah, sure. I'm just looking now. Well, no, there is a Caverner Souls there, so they could do it when the time comes.
Yeah, it's a possibility, and Ryan didn't use the front side of it, not under any life total pressure, doesn't need to gain the 3 life, has plenty of lands to work with. And Herd Migration, unless Toni can find a Spell Pierce for it, that's going to be a problem for Phoenix.
Yeah, this seems like it could really be a thing here. I'm curious what Ryan's thinking here. There's only really 2 options, I suppose. Either going for Beanstalk Giant or just casting Herd Migration. We're going to go ahead and go with Beanstalk Giant. It looks like as a big 7/7.
Naming giant, I think, there with the cabin. Pretty interesting.
Yeah, a little aggressive, but kind of makes sense at the same time.
Right, and this is kind of why you see Toni having put all of those fiery impulses in hand. Ryan, had that beanstalk giant in the adventure zone, oh, was that a spell pierce?
Yep, did find the spell pierce. So
Oh
now
my
not going to be
goodness.
able to resolve the herd migration.
Oh, and that really was the turn for Ryan to do so. Wow, that's gotta hurt.
But let's look at other options Ryan might have, right? Could still resolve a Carnosaur, could still resolve just a top decked Quintorius, right? There's still a lot of ways Ryan can get a win here.
Right, and the that's the thing. Like this deck, every single draw is just kind of insane. You know, a lot of the time with ramp decks, you know, think of something like Domain in Standard, where later on in the game you don't necessarily want to be drawing your ramp spells. But in this deck, the ramp spells are also giant threats. So it's pretty nice to be able to find them off the top of your deck. And maybe you don't need the Fertile Footsteps, but I have an 8/8. What are you going to do?
Yep, so it looks like we're going to fire these lightning axes off and just saying, yeah, we don't want to deal with an 8/8, possibly 9/9 next turn. But this
I
isn't,
wouldn't want to deal with an 8/8.
yeah, this isn't bad because you do have both lightning axes. You get to fill the yard, try to use the treasure cruise. I believe there's a phoenix in the yard you can get back here. So this is a little bit of something for a turn.
Oh, that spell pierce getting discarded.
Interesting. But I kind of get it. I think Toni might be looking at Ryan just having so much mana now that it may not matter as much. And having Otawara at least presents a situation that you could use later.
Oh, absolutely. I completely agree. I think the decision is good. It was just this specific scenario of Ryan kind of maybe lining up this herd migration to be cast and Toni pitching the one thing that would have actually helped in that scenario is just kind of insane. And there it is. Ryan is going to be very chuffed, I think, to get those 3/3s on the battlefield.
Yeah, Toni got a little uncomfortable in his seat there whenever he saw the 5/3/3 show up.
Yeah, and of course, Toni didn't know that Ryan had it. It's not something that you expect. It's not something that you're thinking about. Toni had his head in the right place, was thinking more about the Quintorius, you know, and about how to disrupt the combo. But wow, these 3/3s.
Yeah, and this is a big deal here because now Ryan is presenting enough pressure that just a couple of attack steps can end the turn. This keeps Toni from really doing a lot of what he wants. And Ryan still has several top decks that are good here just to win outright.
Well, Champion's Garden isn't one of them.
Looks like we're probably, I'm assuming we're just going to attack here. We're going to go ahead and buy Karuga.
Buying Karuga is nice here. It plays around Spell Pierce. You get to draw 2 cards because of the 2 leyline bindings on the battlefield. And it presents a nice complement to this ground force while Ryan says, okay, plan A right now is the ground. If that fails, plan B, hopefully I get to draw something from this Karuga that's going to put this game away.
Yeah, I guess the other question would be, what are Toni's outs here other than some sequence that's just find a lot of phoenixes and get a big attack?
Oof.
Double ley line. Wow.
Oh, even that line is not really an option for very much longer.
Yeah, that's kind of gone, especially here with the Ledger Shredder going away, because you'll lose some of the discard options.
I love this from Toni, going after the Ledger Shredder and not the Arclight Phoenix. Arclight Phoenix not very impressive in the face of 5/3/3 tokens, and the Shredder, not only can it block forever, but it's going to help Toni dig out of it. So love taking out the Shredder again.
Yeah, I'm sitting here thinking, like, can you even, I mean, you're at 8 here. I was like, you use a lightning axe on Karuga, but that's not nearly enough on its own.
Okay, Prankster finds Prankster. it just doesn't seem like there's anything Toni can do here.
No, I feel like here we're just trying to buy some time.
I mean, Lightning Axe kills Karuga, Fiery Impulse kills one of these. That still leaves 3 attackers. I guess Toni can play out a chump blocker?
Yeah, and you get a Phoenix back here still.
Okay. All right. Toni's not dead yet.
Yeah, still doing something here. Still in business.
And if Toni can win this one, it will just put him in such a great spot for the whole match.
For sure. Gonna go ahead and cycle one of these Jetmir Gardens and just find a Quintorius, and that's gonna do it.
Yeah, Toni maybe can survive this onslaught of 3/3s, but that's definitely going to be putting it away here.
Yeah, I think we all agree that's it. So Ryan is up a game here in the second match, and that's what you need to do here. Like, that's the game, I guess we want to say, of the 3 that you're favored. So Ryan really needs to lock that one up, and now just has to high roll one of these.
Right, and I think Toni won't be feeling too upset. I mean, this is exactly what happened in the first one. He lost game 1. There wasn't a lot of interaction, and you heard it in his interview as well. Wants to play more of that tempo control game post board, and it worked out very well for him the last time. So I think it will be interesting to me to see whether Ryan actually does anything different with the sideboarding. You know, are cards like Consecrate Consume going to come in more copies? Could we maybe see some thought distortions? Because I think for Ryan, there's some problem here in the post-board games that they need to really think about how they're addressing that, and whether what their current plan is doing is going to be enough.
Yeah, I'm kind of wondering, we didn't see Ryan bring in thought distortions before, and I'm curious if you think that actually is something that can help in these later stages with all the interaction that Toni's bringing in.
Right. I mean, it can't get countered, right? So those are some 3 very key words on that spell. Cannot be countered. And, you know, if you have something like some combo pieces in hand, you can use your thought distortion first, set it up, take everything out from your opponent, and then go for the combo the turn after. But Ryan, of course, these players have played these decks much, much more than we here in the booth have, and I'm excited to see how it goes for them.
For sure. And it looks like both players were confident in their previous sideboard plan, so this looks exactly like what we saw during the last match. No changes, really, for either player here.
Yeah, wow, it's Ryan not really finding great hands in the first 2, going down to 5.
Yeah, also interesting that under the circumstances, getting rid of the Tanuki, even though that would help out the mana situation, being low on cards to start.
Right, and I think that this team, I think they must have really identified Ledger Shredder as a big problem for them. We see them time and time again prioritizing using leyline bindings on them, copying them, etc., and keeping that Carnosaur in hand. Maybe a nod to the fact that on turn 3, you might have to be using that Carnosaur to take out a Shredder.
Yeah, I think you're right. There are some concessions obviously being made that direction, and maybe it is just a result of testing and preparation. They said that's the key card. We need to make sure it stays off the battlefield.
Toni kept a 1 lander, which is completely fine in a lot of the time in Phoenix. Every so often you fizzle, and this is the part where you're sweating because, okay, I found another cantrip, but if this one doesn't find a land, it's real bad.
Oh, it didn't. What do we draw? It is not a land.
Not a land.
All right. Well, this is kind of an opening here for Ryan. If they can find some way to kind of ramp up here. Does not, however, so doesn't get to advance their board. Even against Toni, not really having anything here.
Right, but Toni's hand is really not set up to play this game with no mana. The Shredders are pretty expensive in the grand scheme of things. Prismari Command, one of the most expensive cards really in the deck. Mystical Dispute doesn't counter Quintorius until you get to 3. Oh, this is awful now for Toni.
Yeah, not great. I mean, we're not trying to get to a discard situation just to use that Treasure Cruise.
No, absolutely not.
But right now, again, this is giving Toni a plenty of time to draw his way back in here.
Okay, I mean, Toni has the land. Piglet Prankster doesn't help you find a land, so that's not helpful. At least Toni has a Brazen Borrower. So if there's a Quintorius this turn, Toni can do something about it.
Yeah, the tough thing here, though, is because of that, Toni now basically can't play a card, right? Toni has to play defensively under the assumption that any card could be a win card for Ryan.
Right, and look how quickly Toni let this Karuga resolve. Just instantly. I could use my Missile Dispute. I'm not going to. Just knew immediately that the Karuga is not what the battle that he's fighting.
Yeah, sorry, not interested.
You can have that one.
All right, so Karuga's going to get in there for 5, putting Toni down to 13. Looks like we're going to play a Cavern of Souls and rip a dinosaur.
All right, I mean, we'll see what Ryan hits. Wants to hit that Quintorius, first of all.
Yeah, and unfortunately for Ryan, that was the wrong, I guess we'll call it, clone to hit here.
Wow, yeah. And bouncing the Carnosaur is so sweet. Clever Impersonator is not a spark double. Ryan will have to lose one of these Karugas. So it's essentially just did absolutely nothing there.
Yeah, it would have been much nicer if it had been a spark double, so then you could at least copy a Karuga and be non-legendary.
Right. This is tough, though, for Toni.
Yeah, it really is, because on one hand, you're like, I kind of want to leave up the Mystic Dispute, but at the same time, like, you can't just not play anything.
Oh, I mean, the discarding cards to get Treasure Cruise somehow worked. But there's so much stuff that Toni needs. No way of answering the combo this turn. Ryan, I mean, if they go for it and if the Carnosaur hits the right things in the right order, this game could be over. This match could be over.
Yeah, it's Ley Lines kind of feels like insult to injury, as a card to draw here. But Karuga's going to go ahead and get into the red zone. Doesn't get blocked. Toni goes down to 8.
All right. Here's Leyline Binding. I mean, I guess Toni has that Missile Dispute, so if Ryan goes Carnosaur, hit something, even hit Quintorius, hit a clone spell, those are all blue spells. So Missile Dispute is actually still doing a good job of protecting Toni, even in this spot.
Yeah, and just hit Quintorius, and that's all they wrote. All right, so that brings us to all square at 1 match apiece. So we're going to have a third and final deciding match here, and this is kind of all you can hope for, right? You play all weekend, you get to this point, we play 3 games for all the marbles.
Right, and Declan, we were talking about this at the end of the last one, where, Ryan has such an advantage in these pre-board games. Toni did a great job in match 1, winning both post-board games, but Ryan really just needs to steal one of those every single match, and they're going to be walking away with the trophy. So I'm super excited that we get to see a deciding match here. It's all to play for at the Arena Championships.
We're going to get wrapped up here. We're going to go ahead and take a quick break, grab a drink, stretch our knuckles, and we're going to be back for this final match and see how things end.